Welcome back, everybody. This is Road to Justice. I'm Kathryn Simpson. I'm here today with Regina Hebert. Regina, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me again.
We wanted to let you know before we get started that you can also find us on our audio version is on the Anchor app and also on the Spotify app. So you can go find us there and also on YouTube. You can like and subscribe on YouTube. So I believe we left off the first episode letting you know about Dylan McClendon and his death. We left off telling you about an overdose that had happened at the sober living home that Dylan was living at and how that really freaked Dylan out. And that's where we left off. We were telling you about the suspicious circumstances that surrounded his homicide. And first I want to take a minute and I want to tell you about the arrest and the failed charges in this case. Lieutenant Henning of the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office arrested for second-degree murder. He arrested roommates Jay Louvier, roommate Baylor Johnson, roommate Tyler Castro, and eventually the alleged drug dealer who sold them the heroin, Dre Taylor. Those charges did fail, but to Lieutenant Henning's credit, in the incident report, it is stated that Lieutenant Henning told ADA Shelton that the ultimate goal of the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office Homicide Unit was to identify and arrest the actual drug dealer who supplied the boys with the heroin. And this is alleged to be Dre Taylor. All of those charges were eventually dropped, and we will get to that. But we want to say thank you for the work that was put in and how hard he tried at the onset of this case. So let's go ahead and go back to the night of the first overdose. Baylor Johnson took some heroin and he overdosed, and Dylan was there with him. And he texted Regina to let her know about that. Regina, can you tell us a little bit about how Dylan took that and what that was like for him?
It was very hard. Dylan and Baylor were roommates within the house, and Dylan treated Baylor kind of like his brother. It was his brother's age, and Dylan texted me Monday about 1 o'clock, and the first text message told me, "Mama, Baylor relapsed," and y'all may have seen that on the previous episode, but he said, "Mama, Baylor relapsed on dope," and he said, 8 years sober, just gone. And he went on to say how scared he was, and he said it was the most awful thing he's ever seen. He said, "Mama, I had to pick this boy up and carry him to bed and literally stay up and make sure he breathed all night.
Keep him from dying."
In that, Dylan said it was the worst thing he's ever seen in his life.
And Dylan missed work the next day.
Dylan did. Thank God for his very understanding bosses. But yes, he had not slept all night. He missed work. And he texted his dad and told his dad the same thing. And him and his dad got into deeper conversations. And Dylan did a few things to prove I'm not doing that. And it's funny because he took pictures of his money. And, look, Dad, this is the money. Mom knows how much money I have. And this is how much money I have. He was doing everything to build his trust back. And he had commented that he was told Baylor was ODing, or not even ODing. He was told Baylor took just too many sleeping pills, and that's why he was acting the way he was. So,
because the boys knew he was unfamiliar with heroin.
correct. And the boys absolutely knew. And the reason I know that is the house manager himself told me the boys knew Dylan had not been involved in heroin and just was not familiar with it. That came from the house manager later on.
Right. And so Dylan went to Baylor, the roommate who overdosed, and he tried to do the right thing. He told Baylor, either you tell the house manager and come clean, you tell your sponsor, you tell your family, either you tell them or I will. And that was a big deal to Baylor because had he been caught, he would have been evicted and potentially faced homelessness. So this was a big issue for Baylor and for Dylan, but Dylan was serious about his recovery. He wanted to do the right thing, and he was trying to help others around him do the right thing.
He was. He, later on that afternoon, he sent me a text message, probably, 5 o'clock that afternoon, on that Monday. He was with me and my family the whole day before, that Sunday. And he sent me a text message to tell me how much he enjoyed being with family again. And he thanked, or wanted me to thank everyone just for welcoming him, accepting him with his downfalls. And he proceeded to say that he felt good about where he was in his life. He was finally at a point where he could help other people. And he said, Mama, I've never been able to help other people before.
No.
And he said, it feels so good to be able to help. And he said, and this is just the start.
Oh.
And that was the last text.
What a kind heart he had.
And he had asked me, please share this with Nana. I want her to know too. So that's how serious he was. He knew this was new beginnings for him.
No, that is so kind and so sweet to hear. So that's a Monday night, correct?
This Monday at 5 o'clock is when I got the text.
Okay. So we have the overdose that night that poor Dylan had to deal with. And then we are going to move forward and tell you about his death, which happened right afterwards. But before we move forward into that, it is incredibly important for you to know this one fact. I want you to keep in mind that the chief coroner's investigator for East Baton Rouge, Shane Evans, he told you, Regina, that in his expert opinion, Dylan had been deceased for 4 or 5 hours before he was found. A former coroner's investigator, Michael Pazzi, who was on the scene, told the family's private investigator that he believed Dylan could have been dead up to 6 hours prior to his body being found. A third coroner's forensic investigator reviewed the case and confirmed to the private investigator Dylan had to have been deceased at least 4 to 6 hours prior to his body being found. That is incredibly crucial for you to keep in mind as we go through the story. Do you remember Shane Evans telling you that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have the date. When I picked up the coroner's report, I didn't understand a lot of the lingo. And pulled over on the side of the road and I called him. And he said, stop driving and let me read and I'll explain. And he did. And when he was done, I said, but you still didn't tell me the estimated time of death. And he said, everything I just told you, I'm going to say 4 to 5 hours, likely closer to the latter part of 5 hours.
All right. So 911 was called just several minutes after 1 o'clock in the morning. So that would put Dylan's time of death at an estimated 9 p.m., give or take an hour. So next, what we're going to do, I am going to go through the roommate's story that was given to the police the night the police arrived when Dylan was found dead. The roommate said that during the day, and this is the day that the overdose happened.
During the day, meaning Monday, randomly.
So
now, keep in mind, Dylan was up all night, Sunday night, into Monday morning. So he didn't wake up probably till about 12 o'clock that afternoon. And
freaked out.
Monday afternoon. And that's when he was
texting
me and his dad.
On Monday, Dylan is saying, you need to tell your sponsor that you OD'd, and you need to tell the house manager or I will. Now, we get into the roommate's story. On Monday, that same Monday, the roommates say that several of them together made a plan to go purchase heroin again that night. They claimed that Dylan gave them $20 to buy heroin for him, despite his terror over what had happened the night before. Roommate Jay Louvier had the connection to the dealer, and he was the only one with a car. So they claim they made 2 runs to the dealer that night. The first run was made around 6:30 p.m. Ty Castro, Jay Louvier, and Baylor Johnson left in Jay's vehicle to go buy the heroin. Again, they claimed Dylan gave them $20 to buy heroin, but he did not ride along with them. They say they returned to the home after they obtained the heroin, and they ingested the heroin at the sober living facility at the home. Tyler Castro then says that he retreats to his bedroom where he has a girl there visiting him. And after she left, he says he went to sleep. Later that same night, around 10:30 p.m., Jay Louvier claims that he, Baylor Johnson, and Dylan decide to make another purchase of heroin. So Jay says all 3 of them drove back to the same dealer's house, this dealer allegedly being Dre Taylor. And when they returned home, they gathered in Dylan and Baylor's bedroom that they shared together, where Jay put his heroin on a digital scale. Jay then claims that without warning, Dylan suddenly leans over and snorts all the heroin off the scale, which is ridiculous. I can't say that's a lie. I can't accuse him of lying, but that's ridiculous. So in order to make up for the heroin of Jay's that Dylan supposedly just leaned over and snorted all of a sudden, Jay took Dylan's quantity of heroin for himself. And if this story is true, you can imagine that someone would have been pretty upset. I would have been. So they ingest the heroin, and then Jay reports that he went outside to smoke a cigarette, and he was out for about 15 minutes, and then he came back inside to look for his phone. When he did, he says he found Dylan sitting slumped over on his bed, and he found Baylor Johnson unresponsive on the floor. He says that he then moved Baylor up off the floor and placed him in the bed, and he noted that Baylor was taking very shallow breaths. Then he looked back at Dylan, noticed blood and mucus coming from his nose, and no breathing, so he moved Dylan from the bed to the floor and tried to shake him awake. And he noticed that Dylan's lips were blue and there was foam around his nose and mouth. So he moves one roommate from the bed to the floor and the other roommate from the floor to the bed. Okay. So then Jay reports that he goes to wake up Tyler Castro, who claims to have been sleeping, and the 2 moved Baylor Johnson towards the shower to try to get him in a cold shower and throw ice on him. And Tyler dials 911 while Jay goes to wake up the other roommates. We played the 911 call for you in the first episode. We can go ahead and put that again right now. You can listen to that. So after the or during the 911 call, at some point, someone goes to wake up house manager Chris Louvier. Chris Louvier had Narcan, and he administered Narcan to both Baylor and Dylan McClendon, who had supposedly ingested this heroin at the exact same time. But only Baylor was revived. So the police arrive, and Jay tells them that there were no needles involved, that they were simply snorting the heroin, and Baylor was transported to the hospital. Both were thrown out of the sober living facility the next day. All right, so roommate Sean McManus was in the home, and he was in his room playing video games, is what he reports. When he was woken up, he walked into Dylan and Baylor's bedroom, and he attempted CPR on Dylan. But he reported that he felt no heartbeat and no pulse, and he felt that it was clear that Dylan was deceased. Another roommate, Brandon Jabia, claims to have been sleeping through the entire incident, only waking up when EMS arrived. So I think that covers all of the roommates: Ty Castro, Sean McManus, Brandon Jabia, and Jay Louvier.
I want to comment when Sean McManus, now keep in mind the positions that the boy, Tyler, and Jay said he was in. Sean McManus said when he was awakened and approached the room, Dylan and Baylor, he observed them on the floor together. So I don't know. It's so conflicting.
And then it changes.
And then also when, the house manager and Brandon, the house staff member, they also admit when they approached the room, they identified both boys on the floor together, which was after Tyler and Jay supposedly pulled Baylor to another bathroom.
Right, exactly. And the night that the police came, Tyler Castro said that he walked in the room, saw both lying on the floor. But in a later interview, Tyler Castro says that he walked in and Johnson was on the bed and Dylan was on the floor. So we have some strange things going on there. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, a few minutes after 1 o'clock.
1:02 a.m.
1:02 a.m. The 911 call goes out and police arrive. Dylan is pronounced dead at the scene on arrival by EMS, and Baylor is taken to the hospital where he does survive. Jay then tells the police his story about how after they snorted the heroin, he went outside to smoke before he returned inside for his phone, and he found the two overdosing. He claims that he was only outside for about 15 minutes. When the police show up, Jay shows the police heroin sitting on an end table. Instead of your typical story where, you get rid of all the drugs before the police arrive, he shows the police the heroin, points it out to them, which is just interesting.
By Dylan. Just by Dylan.
Just by Dylan, right. Just by Dylan. Not by him, not by anyone else, just by Dylan. So Sean McManus tells police he was alone in his room, and he's alerted by Jay. And when he goes into the room, he finds Dylan on the ground with blue lips and cold skin. Now, remember, according to these boys' story, it's only been 15 minutes since they've seen Dylan alive. And now his skin is cold and his lips are blue. Dylan was transported to the East Baton Rouge Parish Medical Forensic Facility, where a presumptive urine drug screen was performed and showed positive for opiates. A toxicology was taken, no autopsy was scheduled, and Dylan was released to the funeral home. Dylan was an alcoholic, and he had never tested positive for opiates in all of his treatment. His prior therapist
Correct.
said
in
that.
Lafayette, yes.
They confirmed that he's never tested positive for opiates. That was not something Dylan had ever been exposed to. So all of them report the same thing. The roommates and EMS make the same report about the condition of Dylan's body, that he's cold to the touch, that he is quote unquote obviously deceased. His lips are blue, and that he's foaming at the mouth.
And that EMS actually stated he was so far beyond resuscitation efforts.
Right. Just like Sean McManus said when he tried to do CPR, that
Way
he stopped.
beyond. It was, yeah.
So now that we have given you the story that the roommates gave that night, we are going to go over the abundant problems and inconsistencies in this story. I want to start with the coroner's report first. What caught my attention more than anything is the coroner's report says that Dylan had significant petechial hemorrhaging in his eyes. Now, this caught my attention for what may be obvious reasons to some of you. Petechial hemorrhaging is far more common in suffocation deaths, strangulation deaths, not common in an OD death, not common at all. The next medical issue is the lividity, which if you don't know what lividity is, that's where after a person has passed, gravity will pull their blood towards whatever position they're lying in. So, for instance, Dylan, his lividity shows that he was face down. So that means his blood had pooled in his face and on the front side, showing that he died face down and had been face down for at least an hour, for a good amount of time. However, in the roommate story, at no point do they have Dylan face down, ever. Not one time, ever. And then another issue is, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that the dose makes the poison. Aspirin can be poisonous if you take enough. Ricin can be harmless if you have a small enough amount. So the dose makes the poison. And there were how many nanograms of heroin?
There were, heroin is made up of course, opioids. And then the metabolite is called 6-MAM. Mm-hmm. It's this big long word.
Right.
The 6-MAM that it breaks down into, that's what determines that it's heroin and not just opioids. So the 6-MAM that made it the heroin, he had 5.1 nanograms in his system, which is way beyond the cutoff
which
level.
Is nothing. 5.1 nanograms of heroin is an incredibly low dose.
And, not to cut you off, but Shane Evans also, when I met with him to get the toxicology, his comment to me was, see, this right here, this is nothing. Most people, these numbers are in the hundreds and thousands. Mm-hmm. So that spoke volumes to me as well.
Yes, it does speak volumes. It speaks far more than 5.1 nanograms. We can say that. So going on beyond just the significant petechial hemorrhaging, the lividity that makes no sense according to the story, and the incredibly small dose of heroin that was fatal for this boy who's 250 pounds, going past that, we are going to start with the other problems. The other problems are Tyler Castro's girlfriend who was visiting that night. The one that he said he went to his room and visited with her, and then when she left, he went to sleep. She has never been identified or interviewed. Now, I want to send a message to this girl, whomever she may be, and plead with her to come forward. Please come forward. You can remain anonymous. Please tell us what you know. You may be the key to solving some of this and bringing justice for Dylan. And you may not even know that you know something. If you would like to remain anonymous, if you're scared, you can trust us. You can contact us however you would like to. Our Gmail is roadtojusticeshow@gmail.com. Any way you would like to contact us, contact the police, contact Crime Stoppers, you may do so, but please come forward. You can make a difference in the life of this family. It can't be more important. So after that, after the issue about the girl being there, we have the fact that 2 roommates claim to have been sleeping during this incident. Yet, phone records for all of the boys show that their phones were active and very active throughout the whole entire night. There is no way they could have been sleeping and using their phone at the same time. So that definitely casts doubt on the fact that they claimed they were sleeping.
And to me, what seems crazy is if they are all together,
right?
Why are they all texting each other?
Mm-hmm. As much as they were. I mean, right. I understand, say my son is upstairs and I'm in the living room. Sometimes I'll text him, hey, what do you want for dinner? But not 37 text.
Well, they've already admitted they're in the same room.
True.
I've been to that house, and that house, you can
call out and hear.
You can, say someone's name loud, and they're going to hear. But the fact that they admitted Jay admitted that they're all in the same room together. Mm-hmm. They're all in the car together. They're all
together. Why are we having...
I'm not going to text you if I'm sitting right here.
Right.
Right?
Or if you walked out the room to smoke a cigarette and come back, that it doesn't make any sense. I can't say that anybody lied, but I can say that it makes no sense. Okay, so let's see. The other issue is that all of Dylan's money is missing. He had, was it $226? $265, and that was never recovered. No. The heroin was left on the end table for the police to see, but no money.
That was one of the first things Kevin asked one of the detectives, or I'm not sure who, what about the money? And everybody played dumb. What money? I know for a fact he had money. As I mentioned earlier,
he sent the
pictures. Kevin has pictures of the money. Dylan was trying so hard to get trust back. We know Dylan didn't have phone service. He didn't earn that yet. So he absolutely did not have a vehicle. Mm-hmm. So there was no way he could have gone anywhere that day.
To spend the money.
$265? Absolutely not.
And even according to the roommate's story, if it's true, what they say, that he only spent $20 on this incredibly small amount of heroin.
Supposedly. Because Tyler Castro states that he didn't even know Dylan was involved in this. He didn't even know Dylan gave money until Tyler, Baylor, and Jay were in the car and had already left.
Right.
So
red flags everywhere.
But even the evidence log, nothing of Dylan's money. Nothing.
So another thing before we get to the last couple of things is that first, they say that they tell the police that there are no needles involved, that they are insufflating the heroin. No needles involved. However, in the follow-up interview, when they are called in after they've been arrested and they go in and Lieutenant Henning is interviewing them, Jay does finally admit that he did have needles and that one would assume they were using them to shoot up. If you have them, that's what they're for. So I'd say that's a fair assumption. So first, they say no needles, and then they admit that there are needles. So we've got stories all over the place. So So the last couple of things is, one of them is a text message that Tyler Castro sends to Regina 3 years after Dylan's death. We're going to put that up on the screen for you. And Regina, what did Tyler say to you?
Tyler, it was kind of crazy how it came about. I'm a mom, so yeah, I would stalk him. And Tyler posted something on Facebook, and I can pull that message up too. But it stated that he felt sorry for the people in his life who had passed away, and they couldn't do anything about it, and it wasn't their fault. And he specifically named his grandmother. He specifically named his cousin. And he specifically named Dylan. Mm-hmm. So my first thought was, he's admitting Dylan could not do anything about his death. He's comparing him to his grandmother.
Right,
and
right.
Something in that text indicated he, I don't know, kind of to the point, suicide maybe. Mm-hmm. And through Messenger, I reached out to him like, I don't know this boy. I didn't meet all the people at the sober living house. But when he sends me that text later on, you would think he knew me. Anyways, I kind of reached out to him to talk to him. Mm-hmm. Like, do you need help? What do you need? And I unsent the message. Then I sent it. And then I unsent the message. Like, I had so many mixed feelings. I'm mad at you, but I don't dislike you, and I don't want you to die. I'm angry. Mm-hmm. Tyler noticed I reached out, and he noticed the unsent messages, mm-hmm. which prompted him to text me, and he said, "Hey, Miss Regina, I hope everything is okay." And he proceeded to say that he was on the road to the healthy path, and he went on to say that he knew what happened that night in the unfortunate situation that he was put in. And he knows that he did the right thing by calling 911. Unlike others involved who wanted to wait until the next day to contact so that they could deny their involvement in it.
And he said, "Happy holidays."
And then he said, "Happy holidays, stay strong." December 21st of 21.
How did you react to that? How did that make you feel?
I don't remember. But first of all, it was like, I've got something. He's trying to talk. He's trying to say
tell me
something. And then I started thinking the negative, and that's great you call 911. But what people don't understand, he didn't call 911 for Dylan.
Right.
Dylan had been dead.
Hours.
He called 911 because Baylor Johnson was overdosing.
Right.
So, yes, I'm glad. You did great, but you did not call them for Dylan.
Right.
So, had Baylor not started overdosing, their plan to go to bed and wake up and Dylan be dead with heroin by him, mm-hmm. and them not know, it would have worked. It would have worked.
Yes.
And it's disgusting. It's bad enough that people were in and out knowing a body was in that house 5 to 6 hours. But to know that the heartless person let's just wait till the next day.
How could you sleep?
How could you go to sleep in a house when you know a person is dead in another room and had been dead due to actions y'all brought to him?
And according
and God
to
knows what else.
The incident report, how many hours had he been on heroin at this point? All of them had been on heroin
this was Monday night after midnight into Tuesday morning. So him and Jay and Baylor, remember, they went out Sunday night. So they haven't been on heroin since
the day before.
At least Sunday evening.
Right.
So this is what, 36, 8, I don't know. And I don't know what they did all day, Saturday or Saturday night. This is just from what
they've admitted.
Know. So, yeah, you have these boys that had been on heroin, say 48 hours. They're still living.
Right.
But Dylan did it once, and he died. No fentanyl.
No fentanyl.
Make it clear, no fentanyl.
No fentanyl in his system. None.
That's what's killing everybody these days. I can't even blame it on fentanyl.
Right.
To help me understand. No fentanyl. So it still haunts me to this day. No, I'm not glad that anybody OD'd, but had Baylor not OD'd, their plan would have worked.
Right.
And like Dylan would have just walked out in the middle of the night and went and got heroin and came home, did it by himself, and they just woke up and oblivious to everything.
Deny any involvement or knowledge. And similarly, not long after Dylan died, the roommate, Brandon, I don't know if it's Habia or Jabia, he told you that Dylan deserved justice.
It wasn't just not long. It was the next morning. So we get Shannon called about 4 o'clock in the morning. And when my mom and my sister got to my house, the three of us, of course, went directly to the sober living home. And we probably got there 7:30, 8 o'clock, and to pack up all his stuff. And I'm just sitting on the bed. I think I mentioned this before, looking around, just saying, what the hell just happened? I'm still, like, I wanted to go, why can't I go to the coroner's office and identify him? Maybe it's not him. But no, we weren't allowed to do any of that. He was identified by the roommates, and he was identified by his ID card that was in the wallet with his money. But the money wasn't there, but his ID card was. So as we were walking out the door for the final time, thank God, Brandon Jabia, Brandon,
right.
we don't know, he told me, my mom, and my sister, I'm just going to let y'all know y'all deserve justice for Dylan.
So it's extremely strange to me that two boys are talking about justice needed in an overdose, what's supposed to be an overdose case.
And they told Dylan's dad, Kevin, the same thing on Sunday after he died. Mr. Kevin, y'all deserve justice for Dylan.
Right. That's, and I don't know, but I find that strange that they are talking about Dylan deserving justice for something they claim he did to himself. This is an odd thing, even though it is second-degree murder to sell someone drugs, and if they die from those drugs, you may be charged with second-degree murder. It is still strange for two addicts to be saying to the family that Dylan deserves justice. I find that a very, very strange thing.
And that came from Brandon, who wasn't involved with the three.
Right.
Who went and got it. So it saddens me too, and it's crazy because I have no fear of doing anything when it comes to finding the truth. I've texted him. I've called him. Please talk to me. What did you mean? What did you mean when you said that? I reached out. I texted Sean McManus. I don't know these people, but it didn't stop me. Sean, thank you for giving my son CPR. I would like to meet you. But no reciprocation from any of them.
And at the point that you did that, had they been charged yet and arrested yet? So yes, they've already been arrested and charged, and eventually the charges are dropped. So of course they are going to be a little bit tight-lipped. They don't want to go to jail. They don't want to go to prison. They don't want those charges to come back up.
They knew very early on that, I don't know how to say it. They knew very early on that they were probably going to be cleared of it. We weren't made aware of that. The whole time up until 2020, up until even when Drashun Taylor came into the picture August 12th, the irony and craziness of how that happened, we were still under the impression, we thought it was a win-win situation. Hey, they got the dealer and the boys. The whole time it was, we got the dealer, nothing's going to happen to the boys.
Right.
And I found out different things along the way. I was given all this information on violent crime victims. And all these interviews, these boys were brought down to violent crimes unit. And I'm told, and I'm signing forms, papers about all these rights I have as a violent crime victim. So that's telling me something.
Red flags.
Red flags. Why did you bring Tyler Castro down to the violent crimes unit? I Google everything. What's violent crimes unit? And it's a very specific unit within the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office in Baton Rouge, the one by the state police, with all these different entities involved, and it is specific to violent crimes.
Exactly what it says.
And each of the boys that were interviewed were brought to the violent crimes unit, and I'm having problems digesting that.
Sure.
But in the midst of all these rights that I have as a violent crimes victim, I'm supposed to have knowledge of court dates, of everything that goes on. And that didn't happen. I found out along the way that Tyler Castro had a court date I was not made aware of. He had a court date, and basically it was to get permission for him to leave, because he had been arrested, to leave Louisiana and move back to Ohio. And I should have been made aware of that. I should have been at that court date. We were not kept in the loop about anything.
It's just another case of crime victims not being kept in the loop, not being treated correctly, being discarded. And I'm not going to get upset. I'm not going to go off about this, but crime victims are not handled and treated the way they are supposed to in Louisiana, and that has got to change.
It does. And is it an OD
or is it something else?
Because everything that I have, it's indicating homicide. It's indicating violent
Well, it's a homicide even if it's an OD. It's a homicide because they can be charged with second-degree murder. So it's a homicide.
Violent crimes, which then I start thinking blood and vomit, EMS report, clearly they didn't beat around the bush like the coroner's report about frothy fluid coming out. They flat said blood and vomit coming out of his nose. So when I do my research on that, of course, It's not good.
Raises questions.
It does. Blood, yes. I have a folder this thick. And basically it indicates strangulation. It indicates suffocation. It indicates traumatic brain injury. And I accidentally saw a picture of Dylan. No, not expected. And
sorry.
His swollen.
With lividity.
He looked like a balloon about to pop. And then how did this happen in 15 minutes? Nothing.
It can't.
Nothing makes sense.
Nothing makes sense.
And so the investigation turned, what was going good turned, and the Drashon came into the picture and went to the grand jury. And they didn't get an indictment, which they got a
pretermitted. The grand jury pretermitted the case, which means they couldn't find enough evidence to convict Drashon
at the time. But it kept the case open. Should further information, but by keeping the case open, kept us from obtaining record.
Yes.
So I learned a lot about that because in a grand jury, as I think I've told y'all before, prosecutor could sell it. They get an indictment when they want one.
Yes, this is the truth. A grand jury is secret from the public. It is the prosecutor's show.
It is. And the pretermit, it keeps it open and it keeps us from getting all the information.
So I do want to mention one last thing about the inconsistencies and the strangeness surrounding Dylan's homicide. So we know that according to the coroner's department, Dylan had to have been dead long before 12:30 a.m. Yet Dylan's phone is sending text messages to Tyler Castro's phone and another person. So
at 12:47 a.m.
we know this could not have been Dylan. Dylan was dead. So someone, it wasn't the phone itself, someone is using Dylan's phone to make it look as, well, I don't know if I can say that. It seems as though the reasoning would be to make it look as though Dylan is still alive. I can only guess that that's the reason why, but what other reason would there be to get on Dylan's phone and pretend to be Dylan? So, again, one last thing I want to ask this girl that was there with Tyler Castro. You could offer this family a remarkable amount of peace. You could change their life. The roommates who were there, with what you know, you could change this family's life. You could make such a huge difference. I would plead and beg with you to come forward, to say what you know anonymously, any kind of way. Just find a way to get the information to them so they know what happened to their son. Because in an OD death, you don't get significant petechial hemorrhaging. You don't get lividity that shows you died face down and stayed that way for hours. You don't get 5.1 nanograms. You don't get changing stories. You don't get any of this stuff in a simple OD death. This is not what that was. So please, whatever you know, please come forward. You will make a huge difference. And stay tuned because we're not done. We're far from done. In our third episode on the homicide of Dylan McClendon, we are going to talk about the failure of the coroner's office to conduct an autopsy. We would have questions to all of these answers had they simply conducted an autopsy. Not only that,
might have justice.
Not only that, but Dylan was buried for 4 days before the official toxicology report even came back. Okay, yes, they did an initial urine test, but as one deputy coroner told me, those tests aren't worth the urine that they put on them. So an official toxicology report is imperative along with an autopsy. It's the law in the first place. And when you don't follow the law, we get a situation where we have all of this weirdness and potential crimes that potential criminals who are left out there and on the streets to do this to another person and another person and another family. And it's got to stop. So,
and with the time, you have the coroner pronounce time of death, 2:18 a.m. But you already know EMS declared him dead. You know all this. Wouldn't that indicate we need to do an autopsy because of the time difference? Not only did they not do an autopsy, they didn't do a full external exam because the number one thing that should have been done was taking a core body temperature, which is the second best way to determine a time of death. They didn't even do that. Which it was my understanding, if you don't do an autopsy, you're supposed to do an external exam.
yes.
That didn't happen.
No.
To even time of death to them was irrelevant.
Yes, they listed the time of death as the time that they found Dylan's body and called it a death.
If it was 2:18 a.m., my son was an organ donor. Why didn't you honor him and do what he asked?
What made his organs unsuitable?
If he died at 2:18.
So this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. And perhaps we could get some help from, let's see, the manager of the home. What was his name again?
Chris.
No, Daniel Gilmer.
Who's the owner of Silver Lining.
Silver Linings, whose father-in-law is an investigator with the state police. So perhaps we could get a little bit of help there or understanding there. So stay tuned, because we are going to come back to you again with a third episode on Dylan's homicide. And we are going to go forward and explain to you what the coroner's office should have done, could have done to save the family this torture and heartache, and what you can do about it. And so that's coming. So stay tuned. And Regina, I want to say thank you for being here. I know this is hard for you. I know this has to be difficult and emotional.
It's worth it.
You got to fight, and I respect you for that.
Give up.
And it's ridiculous that crime victims have to fight for justice. It shouldn't be that way. That's not what we want our state to be.
We have to fight for truth, let alone justice.
It's ridiculous. That's not how this is supposed to be. That's not what we want Louisiana to be. That's not what we want to happen to you. That's not what we want to happen to anyone else in our community. So stay tuned, and we are going to come back to you with more information and what you can do about it. So, Regina, I just adore you. I love you. Thank you.
Thank y'all for having us.
This has been Road to Justice with Dave Kay and Kathryn Simpson. We will see you next week. See you on the road.